heavily armed mercenaries just blew the doors off a brutalist Mafia safe house. But they are about to get slaughtered by a girl with a laptop, while hardened cartel killers scrambled for cover amidst deafening gunfire. This so-called weak civilian didn't even flinch. She hacked the smart grid in 3 minutes, plunged the house into pitch-black darkness, triggered an ear-splitting alarm, and pumped choking gas into the room. She dismantled an entire tactical hit squad without ever touching a weapon, leaving the deadly Mafia boss absolutely in awe. Welcome to the midnight hour. Tonight, you and I are stepping into a story that unfolds like a slow, beautiful tragedy. High society looked at quiet Penelope Cartwright and decided she was a pushover, destined to fade into a boring beige book. Nobody gave her stained cardigans or nervous stutter a second thought. But here is a simple truth to carry with you: never judge a bruised soul by the shadows they wear. Thus they wear. Lorenzo Bianchi, the ruthless boss of Chicago's deadliest crime syndicate, learned that the hard way. He walked into her office expecting a frightened lamb. Instead, he stepped into the jaws of an apex predator, hiding in plain sight, holding a digital bomb to his entire empire. She was not his victim. She was his downfall. It all started at Pendleton Financials on the 42nd floor. To the average person on the rainy street, this place looked like a flawless wealth management firm. But to the real players bleeding in the shadows, it was the slickest money laundering machine in the Midwest.
Trapped at a cramped desk in the suffocating darkness of the archives room was 26-year-old Penelope.
She was the ghost of the office. Hiding out in drab wool sweaters, she kept her eyes glued to the scuffed floor whenever anyone spoke. Her toxic co-workers called her Pudding Penny behind her back. Her boss, Arthur Pendleton, treated her like a slightly useful piece of furniture.
Let this be our signature tonight. How you treat the invisible people in your room tells the world exactly who you are. And these people were spectacularly failing the basic test of humanity.
Arthur had an agonizing habit of dumping massive wrecked ledgers on her desk at 10 minutes to 5 on a Friday. He fully expected them magically fixed by Monday, and Penelope always delivered. She never cried, never asked for a raise, just pushed up her thick glasses and vanished into the comfort of the math. Everyone in that cruel office thought she was desperate for any tiny crumb of validation. But they were so deeply wrong. Here is a little midnight wisdom for you: the people who stay perfectly quiet are usually the ones actually paying attention. Penelope did not care about Arthur or his approval. She only cared about puzzle. To her, the cold, hard numbers were the only language that never lied, quietly revealing the toxic arrogance of the men around her. For 3 years, this quiet girl had been secretly translating the darkest secrets of the Chicago underworld. She knew exactly whose dirty money she was scrubbing clean. She memorized every shell company, the offshore routing digits, and the exact bribes handed to Judge Harvey Wallace and the deputy mayor. More importantly, she saw every fatal mistake her clueless boss missed. But the fragile illusion of peace at Pendleton Financial shattered on a bitter, rainy Tuesday. The heavy oak doors blasted open, and the room temperature simply died. Lorenzo Bianchi had entered. He was a terrifying force of nature, wearing a custom charcoal suit that perfectly hid the heavy iron of his shoulder holster. The lesson here is simple: true chaos rarely bothers to knock before it breaks your door down. Lorenzo moved with the terrifying grace of a predator. He was a man who knew he held the power of life and death over everyone breathing his air. With dead, dark eyes, and a reputation built entirely on the blood, his syndicate owned the docks and the underground gaming rings. Heisen was the architect of pure violence. He marched straight into Arthur's glass office, flanked by 2 towering bodyguards. From a cramped desk in the shadows, Penelope watched the drama unfold through the dusty blinds. Arthur turned the color of ash, his expensive silk tie suddenly looking like a hangsman's rope. Lorenzo spoke, his low, velvet voice slicing right through the glass. "We have a discrepancy," he whispered. Arthur starts spitting slits. "Let us remember sheer terror will always unmask a hollow man." Arthur was practically begging, his voice trembling as he swore every cent was accounted for, and the Cayman trance went through perfectly. But Lorenzo just leaned over that heavy mahogany desk and dropped a nightmare. $40 million, Arthur. 40 million vanished from the waterfront account, a Geneva ghost firm that Arthur allegedly authorized. Arthur collapsed into his leather chair, hyperventilating as the walls closed in. He immediately started throwing his loyal team under the bus, crying that it must be a computer glitch. "Let me give you another truth to hold on to tonight. A weak and frightened leader will always blame their people when the fire gets too hot." Lorenzo just stared. He pulled a suppressed pistol from his jacket, set it on the desk, and softly said he did not believe in glitches. Lorenzo delivers his ultimatum. Arthur has exactly 24 hours to produce the missing cash, or the debt gets paid in blood. The air in the office instantly turns to lead. Every employee freezes, paralyzed by the sheer terror radiating from the center of the room. Except for Penelope, standing quietly by the printer. She does not tremble, as the most dangerous man in Chicago locks his hollow eyes onto hers. She lets out a faint and actually rolls her eyes, a microscopic slip. But Lorenzo breathes fear for a living. He stops dead in his tracks, studying this invisible girl in a faded beige sweater. A simple lesson for us tonight: sometimes the most dangerous predators hide right in plain sight. They wear the quietest faces, waiting patiently for arrogance to completely blind you. She wore the disguise of weak prey, but beneath her thick glasses, her gaze was razor-sharp and undisturbed. Lorenzo points a leather-gloved finger at her, his dark voice slicing through the silence to demand her name. Sweating and desperate, Arthur rushes forward. He dismisses her as a nobody, a simple clerk, frantically ordering her away. Penelope clutches her papers tightly, playing the frightened victim. "It is Penelope," she whispers, her voice breaking just right. But Lorenzo is hooked. He steps into her personal space, his massive frame towering over her. "Did you roll your eyes at me?" Life constantly teaches us that those who shout the loudest are rarely the ones holding the real power. True control is silent, calculating, and absolutely never needs to raise its voice to be felt. Penelope shrinks back, her hands shaking right on cue. She stammers out a fragile excuse about having a bad astigmatism and twitchy eyes. Lorenzo lets the suffocating silence stretch out. He knows she is lying. Her terrified performance is flawless, but he already senses the cold intellect hiding behind her disguise. Leaning in, he drops his voice to a chilling whisper. 24 hours. He suggests she help her boss find the money before he tears her art shreds. The moment he walks out, the office collapses into chaos. While Arthur screams at everyone to rip the servers open, Penelope simply walks back to her desk and quietly boots up her laptop. Remember this simple truth: real power always remains perfectly calm, while weakness panics. The men in that room were running in blind circles, entirely unaware that she had already won. Here is the beautiful twist in our story. Penelope did not need 24 hours to find the cash. She already knew exactly where those $40 million were, because she was the quiet architect who stole it 3 weeks ago. Later that evening, Heavy rain pours down as Penelope walks home. Under a battered yellow umbrella, she takes a dark alley shortcut, splashing through cold puddles. Suddenly, blinding headlights pin her against the wet brick wall. A dark SUV cuts off her path, and two massive men step out into the downpour. She is completely boxed in. They smile, thinking they have cornered a helpless mouse. But life always teaches us sometimes, when you think you are hunting weak prey, you are actually stepping straight into waiting jaws of a predator. Penelope had waiting for this ex-trap smashing all night. The heavy door of the SUV swings open, and Lorenzo steps out into the freezing rain. Under a sleek black umbrella, the city lights bleed across the wet asphalt, casting him in dark shadows. An astigmatism, he murmurs softly, pacing up to her. He mentions he asked his doctor, and, strangely enough, bad eyes do not cause you to roll them when a man threatens your boss. Penelope stands frozen, her tiny yellow umbrella shivering in the wind. She slides back into character, begging to go home and feed her hungry cats. Lorenzo lets out a deep, chilling laugh that cuts through the bitter storm. He orders her to finally drop the pathetic act. Let this be a harsh life lesson. You can only play his innocent fool for so long before the true players see exactly who you are. The mask of weakness was finally slipping, revealing the cold steel underneath. Lorenzo lays out the truth. He knows Arthur lacks the guts to steal $40 million, let alone the brains to hide it. His men spent 6 hours tracing that Geneva account, hitting a firewall so vicious it fried 2 servers. He steps closer, his voice heavy with dark admiration. He knows she was the only one in that office without a racing heart. She is the true phantom pulling the strings. Then, the beautiful shift happens. Penelope takes a slow, deep breath. The frantic shaking stops. Her defeated posture vanishes into the cold rain. She strains in her spine, and suddenly the quiet clerk commands the entire alley. Here is a simple truth to hold on to. Tonight, real power never needs to loudly announce itself. The true Penelope has finally entered the game, and she is glorious. She looks at the most dangerous man in the city, and she smiles. Today, you and I are going to unpack a brilliant deception. So watch what closely. The fragile, trembling meekness Penelope wore like a cheap coat simply vanishes. In its place is a cold, piercing brilliance that freezes the blood of a hardened Mafia boss. Her stutter is wiped clean, leaving a voice heavy with sheer condescension. As his men stumbled into a trap she planted 30 days ago. By sunrise, 3 terabytes of fabricated evidence will drown his servers, and tying his crime family to a murdered senator. Panic hits Lorenzo hard. His hand shakes as he reaches for his weapon. But Penelope does not flinch. She stares right past the steel, whispering that he should reconsider. It is a harsh reality, but it teaches us a vital lesson. The quietest people in the room are often the ones holding all the cards. Penelope brings the hammer down, heavy and absolute. If her pulse flatlines, or if she misses her midnight check-in, a dead man switch flips. Every hidden ledger, every paid-off politician, and the coordinates of Lorenzo's room's armor will flood the authorities' and the morning papers. Lorenzo just stands there, genuine shock freezing the air in his lungs. He spent his life breaking hardened killers, yet here is a girl in a soaked beige cardigan holding a digital sniper rifle to his legacy. He hisses through his teeth, calling her bluff. She just stares back, reaching slowly into a canvas tote with agonizing calm. It is a striking reminder for all of us trying to read the world. The most dangerous person is rarely the one making the noise, but rather the one controlling the silence. The tension in that alley is thick enough to choke on. The enforcers have their weapons raised. But Lorenzo slowly lifts a single weathered hand. Penelope, this supposedly harmless technician, turns her waterproof tablet toward him. His guarded offshore account reads 0. She looks the aging boss right in the eye and delivers the fatal blow. She is not the thief. The man bleeding his empire dry is Ricardo, the boy he raised from the gutter and trusted like a son. Ricardo has been skimming for 2 years, hoarding 40 million to fund a hostile takeover and a hit on Lorenzo tomorrow. The color completely drains from Lorenzo's face, a quiet agony settling into his bones. It is a bitter truth about blind trust. The hand you feed is often the very same hand holding the dagger behind your back. This betrayal cuts Lorenzo to the marrow. Ricardo was the kid he protected during violent nights on the streets. But that empty balance is a cold fact. The aging crime boss goes completely still, his voice dropping to a whisper as he demands his money. Penelope just shrugs, treating a stolen fortune like a change in the weather. When Ricardo tried to move the 40 million, she grabbed it mid-flight, scattering the funds through a maze of digital vaults. Now, she holds the only key. Lorenzo stares at her, his mind reeling as he asks the only logical question left. Why did she not just take the cash and vanish? We often assume money is the ultimate prize, but those who survive know that true security demands something far more permanent than wealth. A hollow, bitter laugh escapes Penelope. Run where? She lays out the brutal truth. She is 26, armed with 0 street survival skills. If she ran, Lorenzo or Ricardo would easily track her down and bury her. But then she tilts her head, locking eyes with the hardened boss. Running is boring, she whispers. She prefers total control. She holds his 40 million, the proof of his underboss betraying him, and the digital key to his entire empire. She owns him, plain and simple. The rate beats down on the pavement as Lorenzo stares at her, realizing the ruthless monster hiding inside that ordinary wool cardigan. It is a harsh reality we all must face eventually. True power never has to raise its voice to prove it belongs at the head of the table. Stick with me, because the psychological warfare is about to escalate. A rough bark of laughter escapes Lorenzo. He tells her to get in the car before he forgets how valuable her life just became. The scene shifts to a hidden safe house, a concrete fortress buried in the woods. Inside, the air is thick with paranoia. Dominic, his fierce second-in-command, is shouting until his lungs burn, losing his mind over the betrayal. Yet seated on a simple bar stool is Penelope. She remains totally untouched by the aggressive energy of these, ignoring their weapons completely. It reminds us how steady a person can be when everything falls apart. Real strength is having the discipline to sit calmly in the silent eye of a raging hurricane. The tension in that concrete room is absolutely suffocating. Penelope has traded her soaked cardigan for a dark shirt, her fingers flying across 2 laptops. Dominic slams his heavy fist onto roaring Ricardo would never turn against their syndicate. He is blindly convinced this girl is weaving lies, dismissing her as a glorified calculator. He demands they put a bullet in her right now. But Lorenzo just stands quietly in the shadows, making a slow sip of his scotch. He ignores his screaming lieutenant. His dark eyes are locked onto Penelope, deeply fascinated by her total absence of fear. It teaches us a subtle truth about human nature. Those who rely purely on intimidation are usually the very first to lose their actual power. Penelope does not flinch. Her eyes stay fixed on the screens as she explains that if Dominic pulls that trigger, her decryption keys will permanently scramble. Lorenzo would lose his millions, and authorities would map his operation before sunrise. She politely suggests a Zwingli Bink, Calm down, the enforcer snaps, pulling his pistol and lunging toward her. Lorenzo's voice cuts through the room. He does not shout. He simply demands obedience, ordering his man to back off. Dominic freezes, screaming that the boss is being manipulated. Penelope's fingers stop moving. She hits the enter key with a sharp crack. Check your phone, Dominic. It is a powerful reminder that physical force means nothing when your opponent holds all your dark secrets. Dominic frowns, pulling out his encrypted device. You can see the exact second his heart drops. Displayed on the screen is a raw transcript of a secret call he made to his mistress. Complete with GPS logs and audio, Penelope takes a deliberate sip of her water. She looks at the towering man and reveals the devastating truth. She has root access to every single device inside that fortress. She explains, her voice terrifyingly calm, that she can wipe out his bank accounts, erase his identity, or forward his worst sins to his wife before he even pulls the trigger. She stares down this killer without blinking. This moment perfectly illustrates a profound reality of human conflict. A sharp, calculating mind backed by the right leverage will always shatter mindless muscle. A suffocating silence crashes over the kitchen. These men stare at Penelope with creeping horror. It dawns on them that she is not their hostage. She is the warden, and they are trapped in her cage. Lorenzo was watching a dangerous smile pulling at his mouth. He respects the sheer ruthlessness of it. He turns to confirm Ricardo's treason, but the words never leave his throat. The heavy steel door violently explodes inward. The blast shatters the glass, sending deadly shards across the floor. Armed mercenaries pour through the smoke, their rifles tearing the room apart. Ricardo did not wait for tomorrow. Lorenzo draws his weapon, returning heavy fire. It teaches us a brutal truth about survival. Just when you think you have mastered the board, your opponent flips the entire table. Let us look at this piece by piece. Chaos consumes the room. Enforcers dive for cover as automatic fire chews through the drywall. The bitter smell of cordite chokes the air. Lorenzo roars over the deafening gunfire, screaming at Penelope to get down. He expects to see a terrified civilian curled into a weeping ball. Instead, he finds her seated flat on the tiles behind a steel refrigerator, her fingers flying across her laptop. Bullets are shredding the cabinets inches above her head, yet her face remains a mask of colder focus. She shouts over the noise that she needs exactly 3 minutes. Lorenzo fires back into the smoke, screaming that they do not have 3 minutes left to live. It is a stark reminder. True power is not the absence of panic, but the rare ability to focus while your world burns down. Lorenzo fires, dropping a gunman and trying to flank them. He shouts that Dominic caught a bullet. Penelope does not miss a keystroke, demanding he buy her 2 more minutes. The Don reloads, physically shifting his body to shield her from the lead. He fires blindly over the marble, demanding her plan. She speaks rapidly. The fortress runs on a centralized smart grid. Ricardo, system to kill the alarms, and she is fighting to rip control back. A massive mercenary suddenly vaults the island, raising a heavy shotgun squarely at Lorenzo's face. In that exact fraction of a second, the entire house drops into absolute pitch blackness. It shows us a profound truth about conflict. Sometimes, you must deliberately plunge your world into the dark before you can finally seize control. The sudden darkness strips the hit squad of their only advantage. They rushed in fast, trusting the lights, forgetting that control is an illusion in another man's house. From the floor, Penelope shouts the command. A punishing alarm tears through the speakers, forcing the mercenaries to drop their rifles and claw at their ears. The fire system kicks in next, but it does not offer water. It vomits thick halon gas into the room, violently stealing the oxygen from their lungs. Safe inside the kitchen's sealed air pocket, Lorenzo and Penelope listen to the desperate choking of trapped men. In the pitch black of his ruined sanctuary, Lorenzo slowly pulls down his night vision goggles. Let this be a lesson to remember. True power is never the loudest gun in the room. It is knowing how to control the air your enemies breathe. Let us look at this piece by piece, shall we? You and I both know what it feels like to be pushed to the absolute edge. Lorenzo moves through the pitch black room like a ghost carrying the weight of his own violent history, dismantling the hit squad sent by the very man who pulled him from the gutter. As gunfire fades, he hits the red backup lights, revealing a literal graveyard of loyalties. Blood runs down his face, but that sting means nothing next to the crushing betrayal of a father figure. He steps into the kitchen, looking down at Penelope. She sits on the cold tiles, hands shaking wildly from the adrenaline, yet her eyes are pure, undeniable fire. Sometimes, then the flame in stew slowly must burn brighter than the heartbreak trying to consume you. The air inside that ruined kitchen hangs impossibly heavy. Lorenzo reaches down, offering a badly scarred hand. Penelope hesitates for a single heartbeat before taking it. He pulls her to her feet with ease, but deliberately holds on. His voice drops into a raw, broken whisper, stripped of the arrogant armor he wears like a second skin. He tells her she saved his life. Penelope immediately throws up her shield of logic, her voice shaking as she claims she only saved her leverage. If he dies, her protection goes with him. It is a desperate defense mechanism. But Lorenzo just steps closer, bringing a profound intimacy into a room built on carnage, as he gently brushes from her hair. The lesson here is quiet but true. We've built massive walls of courage to guard us, but the right person will always ease my straight through the brick. Let me paint this picture for you. Everyone else looked at Penelope and saw a quiet girl fading perfectly into the background. But Lorenzo saw the beautiful truth. He leans in, his thumb gently tracing the sharp line of her jaw, whispering that he sees the lips monster hiding just beneath her skin. To a man like him, it is the most devastatingly beautiful thing in the world. Penelope freezes. For the first time in her life, the heavy veil is lifted. She is no longer just a shadow or a body she desperately wants to hide. He sees her brilliant, unapologetically ruthless mind for exactly what it is. Hold on to this truth. The right person will never try to fix your dark edges. Instead, they will pull up a chair, sit right beside your shadows, and admire the violent storm you hide from the rest of the world. The North Shore safe house is barely standing. Light bleeds over concrete, exposing the ugly aftermath of a total nightmare. A cleanup crew moves like ghosts, sweeping away the physical sins of the night, but you and I can practically smell the tang of a father's betrayal still hanging in the air. Lorenzo paces the floor like a caged animal, a fresh bandage wrapping his head as he barks furious Italian into a burner phone. The very man who taught him how to be a king is now digging his grave. Across the room, Penelope sits completely still in a massive leather chair. She is running on empty, but her mind is a steel trap snapping shut. Loyalty in this world might be bought and sold, but a truly sharp mind is absolute gold. She is already orchestrating Ricardo's total destruction. For 7 grueling hours, Penelope has been a phantom in the machine. She shifts massive digital vaults across hidden servers, ensuring that treacherous underboss cannot trace a single byte. Lorenzo suddenly slams his phone down, pure stress carved into his jaw. He announces Ricardo just bought the police commissioner and is raiding their physical supply lines. Penelope does not even blink. She takes a slow sip of bitter black coffee and delivers an icy reality check. Lorenzo is fighting a loud street war, while Ricardo is playing corporate Monopoly, using their own clean cash against them. Here is a hard truth about power. Brute force will always eventually lose to quiet, calculated strategy. If Ricardo is feeding off their financial veins, her solution is elegantly ruthless. She will simply cut the lifeblood and bleed him dry. Penelope meets his desperate gaze and softly replies that the deed is already finished. At 4 a.m, she quietly locked down every single one of Ricardo's offshore shell accounts. But a mind like hers knows that is merely a temporary bandage to bury Ricardo before the grand charity galas. They cannot just attack his muscle. They must bankrupt the invisible benefactors holding him up. Lorenzo leans heavily over her chair, demanding the name of the puppet master. Penelope offers a chilling little smile and drops the bomb. State Senator Harrison Caldwell. He has been funneling pension funds straight into Ricardo's pockets. Let this be a lesson for anyone playing a dangerous game. Arrogance and greed always leave a paper trail. When these files see the sun, the senator's life will crumble into absolute federal ruin. If Caldwell falls, Ricardo's armor shatters into pieces. But Lorenzo paces the floor, his heavy voice tinged with dark doubt. He reminds her the senator is a paranoid ghost, locking his financial sins inside an offline server at a heavily guarded estate. Penelope just lets out a soft, completely dismissive sigh. You and I need to stop and appreciate the sheer brilliance of the trap she set. She looks up at Lorenzo and reminds him that no human soul is ever truly spotless. The senator harbors a desperate, foolish vanity for antique art. Weeks ago, he purchased a rare vase through a shadow trust. Remember this harsh reality of life. Our deepest indulgences are often the very keys to our destruction. With a dark, knowing smile, she reveals she planted a dormant virus in the digital files of that auction house over a year ago. The execution of her trap was absolute poetry. The very second the senator's secretary clicked open that digital receipt, Penelope's hidden malware tore straight through their ironclad security. She casually mentions that she has been sitting quietly inside Caldwell's isolated servers for 14 days. Lorenzo simply stares at her, a heavy mixture of terror and pure awe washing over his hardened face. He thought he was hiring a quiet accountant, but he actually invited a digital Grim Reaper into his home. She orchestrated this checkmate before the betrayal was even a whisper. Penelope just shrugs, admitting she likes holding everyone's secrets. Here is a fundamental rule of survival. Never throw away the receipts on your enemies. For the first time in days, Lorenzo throws his head back and lets out a dark, booming laugh. Lorenzo is completely intoxicated by her lethal precision. His voice rumbles through the room, urging her to pull the digital trigger and watch Ricardo drown in panic. But Penelope is already light years ahead. A cold smile touches her lips as she whispers that the stolen files are already bouncing through untraceable servers, landing on every major news desk in the city. The absolute ruin of their enemies goes live in exactly 10 minutes. Let this sink in. Never just threaten to dismantle your demon, take the shot while they are still breathing. Lorenzo realizes tonight's Dariccia Igada will be a psychological war zone. Ricardo still believes he killed his king. Closing her laptop with a soft click, Penelope assures him there will be no messy bloodbath. It will be a flawless checkmate. She just needs a proper suit of armor first. Penelope looks up at him, her voice steady. If she is finally stepping out of the shadows to shatter an empire, she needs armor. Not the oversized sweaters she used to erase herself from the world, but something sharp, real armor. Stares into her eyes and recognizes the Dark Queen claiming her rightful place on the chessboard. He calls for his bruised second-in-command, who now looks at Penelope with genuine terror and orders a private lecture collection brought up. They are preparing for an elegant execution. The scene bleeds into the grand ballroom, a blinding sea of crystal chandeliers and hollow calculating smiles. The charity event of the season is well underway. Never forget this hard truth about the world. The most vicious predators do not hide in dark alleys. They wear tailored suits and smile warmly right in front of each of you. Picture Ricardo Costa standing beside a cascading champagne fountain, breathing in the room like he owns the entire underworld. His perfectly tailored tuxedo barely masks the venom pumping through his veins. Right beside him stands Arthur, Penelope's cowardly former boss, who is practically sweating through his stiff collar. Ricardo shoves a heavy crystal glass into the trembling man's hand, his voice dripping with poisonous confidence. He boasts that Lorenzo is currently not rotting in the ashes of the North Shore estate. By tomorrow, the hostile takeover will be absolute and Arthur will hold the keys to the financial kingdom. But Arthur is visibly vibrating with fear, nervously whispering about the danger of loose ends. Here is a lesson that echoes through time. Arrogance is a blinding poison, and celebrating your victory early is always a fatal miscalculation. Arthur stammers over his own tongue, struggling to warn them that Penelope is gone, carrying their darkest secrets. Ricardo just laughs, dismissing her as a nobody shaking in some dark corner. But right then, the air goes ice cold. The string quartet drags us to a scraping halt. We are about to watch this empire crumble together. Hundreds of faces turn toward the grand staircase as the heavy doors swing wide. Lorenzo stands there in a midnight blue tuxedo, holding the terrifying gravity of a ghost returning for his throne. He locks eyes with the surrogate father who tried to bury him. Never turn your back on the quiet ones you push into the dark. Fate always finds a way to collect its debts, and it usually knocks when you feel the most secure. He stands there like a king claiming his bloody throne. But look closer. Lorenzo is not the one drawing Gus from the room. It is the woman holding his arm. Penelope has burned her camouflage to ash. She wears a custom emerald green velvet gown, a physical weapon that traces every curve she spent years hiding. It is a silent declaration of total war. The anxious bun is gone, her dark hair spilling down her shoulders in heavy waves. The thick glasses are missing, revealing a sharp gaze that mirrors her devastating mind. Your most powerful transformation will always happen the moment you stop shrinking to keep other people comfortable. She bosom does not just look beautiful tonight. She looks like absolute, inevitable ruin. She is absolutely lethal. Arthur stares up at her, the crystal flute slipping right through his shaking fingers. It shatters on the polished marble with a deafening crack. His face completely drains of color. Beside him, Ricardo loses his arrogant smirk, his eyes darting frantically toward the exit doors. Lorenzo and Penelope glide down the staircase with agonizing grace, parting the sea of terrified guests. Lorenzo leans his head close, his voice a low rumble. He calls her his queen, asking for her opening move. Penelope flashes a smile colder than a winter freeze. Isolate the king, she whispers. Remember this well. When you learn to plot your next move in total silence, your final victory will make all the noise you ever need. The tension in the air is thick enough to swallow. The couple stops right in front of Ricardo. Two of his hired guards step forward, but Lorenzo just flicks his wrist. Dominic and three massive enforcers bleed out of the shadows, hands resting calmly on their weapons. The silent threat hangs in the room. Make one mistake, and you die on this marble floor. Ricardo swallows a dry lump in his throat. He is sweating now, forcing a pathetic, shaking laugh. He jokes that he heard Lorenzo suffered a fatal accident. Lorenzo stares completely through the man, softly replying that the rumors of his death were wildly exaggerated. The lesson here is crystal clear. A true king never has to raise his voice. Real authority is always a quiet, steady force backed by brutal preparation. Lorenzo ignores Arthur, who is shaking on his feet. Penelope locks eyes with her former boss. With a voice like cracking ice, she formally resigns, telling him she will not be in on Monday. Arthur panics, hissing that she does not belong among these elites. Penelope does not blink. She calmly states that she belongs exactly where she chooses to stand. Now, you and I are going to love this next move. She pivots to Ricardo, dropping a bomb. His main financial backpacker was raided by the FBI 30 minutes ago. Ricardo plays dumb, but Penelope smiles with the chilling grace of a predator.
Remember this when the world tries to test you. Never let another person dictate your true worth. You alone set your boundaries,
and you claim your own space. Penelope dismantles him right there in the ballroom. She clinically tears apart his operation, pointing out that without his Baccarat cash, he cannot pay his muscle. Without those soldiers, he instantly loses the city ports. And without the 40 million he tried to steal, he is nothing but a broke man wearing a borrowed suit. Ricardo drops the charming mask. He steps into her space, spitting that she blocked his money. He threatens to burn the hotel down, bragging about the 50 armed men waiting out back. Penelope is absolute ice. She pulls a phone from her clutch and politely corrects him. He has 50 mercenaries expecting a payout at exactly 9 p.m. Listen closely to this hard truth. Loyalty bought with cold cash evaporates the very second the money dries up. She casually glances at her watch, announcing it is exactly 8:59 p.m. The tension in the room feels like a ticking bomb. The wealthy guests back away, leaving a wide, empty ring around the confrontation. Ricardo is sweating through his collar. He hisses that she is bluffing, bragging loudly. That his offshore accounts are hidden behind heavy encryption. Penelope gently tilts her head. They were secure, she whispers, right up until she personally hacked the system and burned his protocols to the ground. She falls silent, watching her glowing screen as the final seconds bleed away. Take notes on this one. Never underestimate the destructive power of pure intelligence. A sharp mind will always tear down an empire without throwing a single punch. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ricardo's phone vibrates violently in his pocket, buzzing like a trapped hornet. His hands physically shake as he pulls it out. The screen is blowing up with panicked messages from his crew. Every single transaction bounced. All accounts are frozen solid. Outside, his hired muscle realizes they are not getting paid to fight a mafia boss, so they melt away into the dark. Ricardo looks up, his eyes completely desperate. 2 years of plotting a bloody takeover, erased in 60 seconds by an accountant in a velvet dress. He screams that she ruined his life. Lorenzo steps in front of her, softly replying that Ricardo ruined himself. The truth is simple. Greed builds a fragile house of cards, and reality is the wind that knocks it flat. Lorenzo drops his voice to a deadly whisper, reminding Ricardo that breaking the oath makes him a dead man walking. Pushed into pure desperation, Ricardo snaps. Knowing he cannot beat Lorenzo, he draws a combat knife and lunges at Penelope. Stick with me here, because this is the moment her transformation becomes physical. The terrified girl is gone. She does not scream or freeze. She smoothly pivots onto her velvet heels, slipping out of the blade's path like a ghost. Lorenzo moves with impossible speed, catching Ricardo's arm mid-strike and twisting it with savage force. A sickening snap echoes across the room. The takeaway? Here? When you blindly try to drag others down with your sinking ship, you only guarantee your own brutal downfall. Ricardo screams in raw agony as the knife clatters onto the floor. Before his teeth can even hit the marble, Lorenzo's hand clamps around his throat, lifting the traitor off his feet. Lorenzo looks like a demon, his eyes swirling with unhinged murder. He snarls into Ricardo's face, promising that he never gets to touch her, let alone breathe the same air. It is a terrifying display of primal devotion. Lorenzo tosses him aside like a bag of trash. Dominic and the enforcers drag the sobbing man away into the dark to handle official family business. Watching this, Arthur completely breaks down. He collapses to his knees, weeping for mercy. Here is the heavy truth. Your actions have severe consequences, and apologizing only after the strap snaps shut will never save you. Arthur weeps uncontrollably, desperately trying to throw Penelope under the bus. She stares down at the pathetic manager who spent 3 years abusing her. She feels no pity, only a clinical detachment. She brands an extremity to massive treason against the family. Then she twists the knife, calmly calling him utterly incompetent. She promises him that Lorenzo will not take his life. Arthur pauses, a pathetic spark of hope shining on his tear-stained face. Penelope instantly shatters that hope. She whispers that she just forwarded a detailed file of his personal embezzlement straight to the IRS. Here is a beautiful life lesson. Treating people badly will always come back to bury you, especially when those exact people hold the keys to your darkest secrets. Penelope guarantees Arthur he is not going to die tonight. He is simply going to rot inside a federal cell for the rest of his life. Arthur completely collapses, sobbing into the floor. Hotel security finally rushes over, confused by the silent warfare that just took place. Come with me for this closing moment because it is pure cinematic beauty. Lorenzo turns to face Penelope. His chest heaves under his tailored suit, wild adrenaline pumping through his veins. He stares at this perfectly composed, dangerous woman who dismantled a massive syndicate without firing a single bullet. Lorenzo steps into her space, ignoring the terrified crowd, and lets out a heavy breath of pure awe. The final lesson here, the absolute sharpest weapon to Shawenshin you can ever wield, is a brilliant, deeply focused mind. Let us look at this sequence, piece by piece, shall we? Lorenzo stares into Penelope's eyes, his voice a low rasp as he calls her magnificent. For a fraction of a second, her cold armor cracks, revealing the thrill breathing beneath her velvet gown. She looks up, admitting she prefers holding total control. How does Chicago's most terrifying syndicate leader react? He grabs her face, entirely ignoring the panicked whispers of the wealthy elite. He leans in and dares her to control him, confessing that he is entirely at her mercy. Here is a lesson for us all. True power is not about dominating every single room you enter, but knowing exactly when to surrender your strength to the right person. When their lips finally meet, it is a mutual explosion of pure dominance. That kiss is raw, fueled by burning adrenaline and newfound authority. Penelope kisses him back with a beautiful savagery, proving the quiet wallflower she used to be is gone. In her place stands the undisputed queen of the Chicago underworld, holding the city's darkest king right in the palm of her hand. By the next morning, the landscape has shifted. Ricardo Costa is erased from existence, buried under a concrete project before sunrise. Arthur sits weeping in a county jail cell, completely broke and staring down a 50-year sentence. The paper trail perfectly avoids the Mafia family name. The lesson here is timeless and brutal. The loudest guy in the room makes himself the easiest target, while the quiet observers silently rewrite all the rules from the shadows. Penelope is never stepping foot in that suffocating basement. Archive again. She traded the forgotten dust for a massive glass penthouse at the peak of the newly acquired Bianc Tower. Picture a modern fortress lined with heavy steel and humming server racks. Lorenzo stands in the doorway, swirling a glass of expensive bourbon, utterly captivated by her. 3 weeks have passed since the violent chaos of that gala. The physical bruises have faded, but the power dynamic of the underworld has fundamentally shifted. She stands barefoot on a priceless rug, wearing his oversized shirt, studying a digital map of the Midwest. The lesson to carry with you today is simple. When you finally choose to upgrade your internal mindset, your physical environment will naturally follow suit. Her hair is piled in a messy bun, with a pencil tucked behind her ear. To an outside observer, she looks like a tired professional working late. But Lorenzo understands he is looking at a brilliant general plotting to conquer the continent. Without pulling her eyes from the glowing monitors, she calls him out for staring. Lorenzo simply smiles, his voice a low hum as he admits he is admiring the view, and he walks over, sets his bourbon down, and wraps his arms tightly around her waist. He pulls her close, breathing in the scent of warm vanilla and strong coffee, reminding her she has been working for 12 straight hours. Please remember this life lesson. Ambition is a magnificent engine for success, but you must always pause to allay the loyal people standing in your corner. Lorenzo whispers that the rival Irish mob can wait until tomorrow. Penelope releases a heavy sigh, letting her weight sink into his chest. Their romance remains a guarded secret, locked inside this bulletproof penthouse. On the streets, she is known as his terrifying business partner, but here, she is the single emotional weakness this hardened boss has ever allowed himself. Penelope taps a key, and the digital altar map zooms into the south side. She warns him that Declan Fitzpatrick is not waiting. The Irish boss believes the docks are vulnerable, trying to smuggle his goods without paying the required toll. The life lesson here is crucial. Never mistake a person's quiet stillness for weakness. They are usually just studying your every single move from the safety of the shadows. You and I both know Declan believes they went soft simply because Penelope used to be an accountant. It is a fatal miscalculation based on foolish arrogance. Of us instantly furious. His violent energy burning hot. Declan is a classic brute who solves complex problems with baseball bats. Lorenzo wants to send his hitmen to the docks to burn the operation down and remind everyone who rules Chicago. But Penelope shuts that rage down in a heartbeat. She turns, rests a cool hand on his tense jaw, and firmly tells him the old Lorenzo's is dead. Going in with guns blazing is messy, loud, and incredibly expensive. The life lesson here is clear. Brute physical force is often the worst option on the table. Working with quiet intelligence always beats swinging wildly into the dark. She whispers that they no longer use bullets, but their intellectual advantage. Lorenzo gets shivers looking at the terrifying genius of the woman he loves. He asks for the plan, and she pulls out a massive web of secret financial data. She breaks the puzzle down. Declan despises modern banking, laundering his dirty cash through luxury hotels in Dublin and an offshore hedge fund. Reynolds warns that not even federal agents can touch a setup like that. Penelope just flashes the coldest smile. her face painted in the blue light of the screens. She quietly notes that Declan might be untouchable to the government, but never to her. Take this vital life lesson to heart today. True knowledge is the ultimate weapon. When you deeply understand how the system operates, you hold all the real power in the room. Stick with me, because you and I are about to unpack some deep psychological chess. Penelope spent 3 days tracking the hidden ratting numbers Declan uses to bribe foreign judges. Now, this brute wants to sit down at the Drake Hotel, demanding more territory by threatening a bloody street war. Penelope insists on attending, making Lorenzo freeze in genuine terror for her safety. He refuses, calling Declan a rabid dog who will only try to intimidate her. But Penelope shuts his protective instinct down with one sharp look. She tells Lorenzo he will simply stand behind her and let her do the speaking. Here is an essential life lesson for you. Genuine power never needs to bark loudly to command respect. She coldly states it is finally time the entire city learns exactly who holds the leash. The tension inside on the private dining room at the Drake Hotel is absolutely suffocating. Picture Declan, a massive man in a custom tweed suit, flanked by 4 deadly enforcers. Across the table sits Penelope, looking flawless in a sharp, blood-red blazer. Lorenzo looms quietly behind her chair like a shadow of pure violence. Declan arrogantly lights a thick cigar, blows smoke across the table, and starts mocking them. He sneers at Lorenzo, laughing that handing a Mafia kingdom to a quiet bean counter is a pathetic joke. He calls Penelope sweetheart, barking that the violent docs are not a simple spreadsheet. Please remember this important lesson. Never underestimate someone just because they appear neat and exceptionally polite. In the real world, that arrogant assumption is almost always a fatal mistake. Declan keeps bragging, insisting you cannot crunch numbers when his boys' lawyers are out breaking kneecaps. But no, Penelope does not even blink. Instead, she calmly opens a sleek black leather folder. Her icy voice drops the room temperature as she informs to Fitzpatrick that he owes their syndicate $4.2 million in unpaid tariffs. Declan laughs right in her face, asking if this accountant is seriously trying to audit a mob boss. He threatens her, bragging about his 300 armed men and swearing he will turn Chicago into a bloody war zone. Penelope stays completely still, rooted in quiet confidence. Here is a vital life lesson for you. The person who loses their temper in a negotiation always loses the war, unfazed by his shouting. She quietly reminds him that 300 armed men require a very steady payroll. She looks him dead in the eyes and whispers that payroll requires liquid cash, a resource he no longer possesses. Declan stops laughing instantly, the amusement draining from his face. He demands to know what she means. Penelope simply slides a single piece of paper across the table. She reveals that at 8 in the morning, an anonymous whistleblower packet on the desk of corporate enforcement in Dublin. It contained ledgers proving that Declan used his hotels to launder cartel drug money. Declan turns a violent shade of purple and lunges forward. Immediately, Lorenzo drops his hand to his weapon, freezing the massive brute in his tracks. Take this as a serious life lesson today. Your dirty seeks will always leave a hidden paper trail somewhere in the world. Declan glares fiercely, spitting out that her claim is an absolute lie. Declan aggressively insists his servers are airtight, but Penelope coldly shatters his delusion. She exposes how he hired cheap security amateurs who relied on basic encryption. She admits she literally hacked their mainframe while waiting for her morning coffee to brew. You and I have probably both seen people make this mistake. But let this be a concrete life lesson. Never cut corners on your foundation, because cheaping out will eventually cost you everything. She calmly informs him that authorities are seizing his luxury hotels right now. His offshore hedge fund is frozen, and his bank accounts are locked down tight. Absolute, sickening horror washes over Declan's mercy. Showing zero mercy, she tells him he is completely bankrupt, and those 300 armed men will be looking for a new boss by tomorrow morning. Penelope delivers the killing stroke, her smile thin as she notes the Bianchi family is hiring. Declan shifts his panicked gaze to Lorenzo, silently begging for old-school gangster mercy. But Lorenzo remains a statue of icy satisfaction. Penelope snaps the folder shut, giving Declan exactly 24 hours to vanish from Chicago. If he lingers past noon, Lorenzo will not need a weapon. She will simply whisper the coordinates of his wife's Tuscan villa to the enraged cartel. He failed. There is a profound truth hidden in this brutal exchange. When you find yourself completely outmatched, you must swallow your fragile pride and walk away before losing the things that matter most. Declan slowly rises, trembling with a sickening blend of helpless rage and absolute terror. Declan stares at the woman he once thought he could push around, seeing only the devil herself staring back into his soul. He leaves in total silence, his enforcers scrambling to follow. Notice this fascinating shift with me, because we are watching pure intellect dismantle brute force. The moment those doors click shut, Lorenzo buries his face in Penelope's neck, his shoulders shaking with euphoric laughter. He murmurs a promise never to negotiate against her. She just smiles, reminding him to always read the fine print. That is the ultimate lesson for any empire builder. Always read the fine print in both business and the people you trust. For the next 6 months, her brilliant system runs flawlessly, trading physics street violence for a clean, untouchable digital monopoly. Let us step into the shadows tonight. You and I picture a city where syndicate profits explode by 400%, yet the streets remain eerily quiet. Not a drop of blood is spilled. The Chicago police are paralyzed, while the Bianchi family quietly swallows half the financial district. But here is a timeless truth you should always carry with you. Massive success will always paint a permanent target on your back. The most lethal predators in this world do not wear ski masks. They flash federal badges. Special Agent Jonathan Miller has been hunting Lorenzo for 10 exhausting years. He traded his marriage and sanity to build a racketeering case. Yet every time Miller closes in, the hard evidence vanishes like smoke, and his star witnesses suddenly forget their own names. Hard drivers wipe themselves clean in the dead of night. It is a rainy Tuesday, the kind of evening that wraps the city in deep melancholy. Penelope is curled up on the penthouse sofa, bathed in the pale glow of her laptop screen. Lorenzo sits nearby, sipping heavy red wine. Without warning, the rhythm of her typing comes to a dead, chilling stop.
She watches a strange string of foreign code bleed
Across her monitor.
Here is something you must always remember. Pay close attention to the quiet warning signs before the real hurricane hits.
She'll out to Lorenzo. Her voice is barely a whisper, but the sheer gravity makes him snap to attention. His relaxed posture vanishes, replaced by the coiled tension of a cornered wolf. She tells him someone is actively inside their private network. Her eyes dart across the screen as she confirms the bitter truth. This is no outside hack. It is an inside job, bleeding their darkest secrets to a federal server in Quantico. Lorenzo stands up, a dark fury rising in his chest as he demands a name. Penelope rips through thousands of code in seconds, bypassing the proxy until she locks onto the physical device. stealing their lives. When she reads the name, a heavy wave of betrayal washes over the room. It is Peter Kensington. The air goes ice cold. Peter is the top legal counsel for the family, a man who stood by Lorenzo for 15 years. This brings us to a harsh reality we all face. The deepest, most agonizing betrayals never come from faceless strangers in the dark, but from the exact people you trust the absolute most. Peter was supposed to be family. Lorenzo asks if she is absolutely sure, his voice dropping into that terrifying, dead calm that always arrives before extreme violence. Penelope softly explains that Peters is using a hidden transmitter disguised as an expensive fountain pen. Every time he visits the penthouse, that pen silently drinks up their files and hands them to the feds. Lorenzo walks over to the glass window, staring down at the rain-slicked streets. He looks like a man completely shattered from the inside. He whispers about how he protected Peter, how he even aid for his daughter to attend college. Listen to me on this one. You can pour an endless sea of money and favors over someone, but you can never actually buy true loyalty. Penelope walks over and holds him tightly. Holding him in the dim light, Penelope reminds him that raw fear makes men do terribly stupid things. She figures the feds dragged some hidden secret out of Peter, perhaps tax fraud, and squeezed his neck until he broke. Lorenzo does not blink. He states with freezing clarity that he will kill the lawyer tonight down at the docks. It is not a threat. It is an unmovable fact. But Penelope holds him tighter and refuses to let him leave. Lorenzo spins around, his anger boiling over, shouting that Peter is handing their entire lives over to the government. Here is an essential truth to carry with you. Reacting purely out of blind rage will only destroy your own position of power. Penelope stares right back into his furious eyes and firmly tells him she has a much more devious plan. She tells him a quick bullet is far too kind for a traitor, and a bleeding body only gives the government something to photograph. Stay with me here, because you and I are about to watch a masterpiece of vengeance unfold. She promises Lorenzo that if the feds want a show, they will get a tragic theatrical performance that will tear their task force apart. Lorenzo feels his anger morph into a dark, calculated curiosity. Penelope knows the lead agent is starved for a massive drug bust to justify his budget. There is a powerful lesson here. The ultimate revenge is taking your enemy's own trap and closing it right on their neck. Peter thinks he is stealing real files, but he is sipping from a poisoned well. She is going to plant a beautiful, fatal trap tomorrow morning. Let us look at this piece by piece, shall we? Penelope outlines her trap with the cold precision of a diamond cutter. She is fabricating a ghost file detailing a $50 million shipment of Colombian snow arriving at Navy Pier at midnight. She flashes a beautiful, bone-chilling smile in the shadows. We are talking perfectly faked guard rotations, phantom license plates, and a flawless forgery of Lorenzo's signature. Lorenzo slowly realizes the beauty of it. There is zero product coming. Penelope knows the ambitious agent will swallow the bait whole. He will drag out tactical teams, wasting millions of dollars to raid the freezing wind. Never blindly trust a setup that looks perfectly handed to you, because someone is always pulling the invisible strings in the dark. While the federal agents are freezing in the bitter rain chasing phantoms, and Lorenzo finally sees the whole picture. A wicked smirk spreads across his face as he realizes Penelope will have unmonitored access to the government network. She tells him the breach is just an appetizer. When Peter uploads her fake intel with his buggered pen, it releases a dormant sleeper virusome straight into the heart of Quantico. The exact second they open the file, the trap snaps shut. Penelope is going to incinerate every photograph, every fingerprint, and every shred of evidence the law holds on the Young family. By Saturday morning, his empire legally will not exist. Brain power will always be the ultimate weapon. You do not need physical violence when you can simply erase history. Lorenzo crosses the room and takes her face in his hands, holding her like she is the only real thing left in his dangerous world. He looks deep into her eyes and asks if she knows just how completely he worships her. Even the most hardened boss will fall hopelessly to his knees for the right mind. Penelope smirks, kisses him softly, and whispers to save the worship for later. Fast forward to Friday night. The freezing winds are howling violently off Lake Michigan, making Navy Pier look like a desolate graveyard of rusted metal. Out in the shadowed, desperate federal agent sits in his black vehicle, his heart pounding with eager anticipation. Sometimes we become so utterly blinded by our own ambition that we sprint headfirst into the fire, ignoring every single red flag. The federal agent sits in the freezing dark, entirely convinced the cowardly lawyer handed him the Holy Grail. The encrypted file promised him the world, detailing container numbers, arrival times, and cartel connections. He whispers into his radio, commanding tactical teams to hold steady in the shadows, while he glares at the thermal screens. Meanwhile, miles away in Lorenzo's lavish penthouse, Peter is drowning in a silent panic attack. Lorenzo called him over for a sudden late-night drink, and the lawyer is sweating straight through his tailored clothing. His trembling hand keeps brushing his chest pocket, terrified the bugged pen might make a sound. When you betray your own blood, the crippling paranoia will rot you from the inside out, long before the final punishment arrives. Let us step into this room where the silence feels like a physical weight against your chest. Lorenzo sits at the oak table, carving a rare steak as though the world outside does not exist. Beside him, Penelope is a study in boredom, fingers gliding across a glowing tablet. Lorenzo points out Peter looks pale, offering a strong drink. The lawyer stutters, sweating through his collar, blaming a weak stomach. Then Penelope strikes. Without lifting her gaze from the glass, she murmurs that working for two opposing sides must be exhausting. The air leaves the room entirely, and Peter turns to stone. We can all learn a timeless truth from this moment. If you try to serve two masters in a ruthless game of survival, you only guarantee your own total destruction. Peter screams for innocence, his voice trembling as he swears he has no idea what she means. But Penelope is a predator enjoying the final moments of a hunt. She sets her tablet down and politely explains she has been feeding him fabricated files for 3 straight months. She smiles, mocking his hidden recording pen, noting his federal handler is losing his pension tonight. The lawyer shatters, bolting toward the elevator in pure panic. He barely takes 3 steps before Dominic, the enforcer, emerges from the dark with a heavy pistol aimed at his chest. Lorenzo calmly tells the lawyer to sit down. As Peter collapses into weeping sobs, we must remember a profound truth. Never try to outsmart the very architects who designed the dark maze we're running through. Feel the cold reality of this penthouse with me. Peter falls to his knees, tears streaking the pristine marble floor. He begs for mercy, screaming as the agents threatened him with a concrete cell, swearing he only handed over useless garbage. Penelope stands over him, immovable as a glacier. She softly corrects his narrative, explaining he only leaked exactly what she permitted. With a tap on her screen, a hacked surveillance feed from the pier illuminates the dark room. As Peter chokes on his own dread, asking what is happening, she flashes a chilling smile and calls it his grand finale. Tactical trucks swarm the pier on the screen. The life lesson here is harsh but vital. People who betray their allies out of simple fear will always be the easiest pawns to control. The monitor glows with sirens tearing through the dark. Armored teams violently breach. The container Peter promised was filled with illegal narcotics. Penelope explains the federal agent expected $50 million in contraband. Instead, he finds 5,000 crates of premium olive oil. The poetic irony is that this shipment is perfectly legal and headed to a local charity. We watch the agent on screen, his posture sinking as his career dissolves. Meanwhile, Penelope keeps typing. By sending his cyber unit to raid this empty prize, the agent left his own digital fortress entirely unguarded. We can all take a profound lesson from this fatal error. Fixating completely on a loud distraction will inevitably leave your true vulnerabilities entirely exposed. A green checkmark materializes on her tablet, confirming the silent purge is complete. Penelope lets out a long breath, physical relief washing over her shoulders. In a fraction of a heartbeat, the entire criminal history of the syndicate vanishes. Wiretaps, surveillance photos, and witness logs are reduced to digital dust. Lorenzo stares at her with profound reverence.
A traitor would have been dragged to a dark basement to bleed out.
But the world has evolved. True survival means flowing with the tide of progress. Brutal physical violence only gets you caught on camera, but erasing your sins quietly in the dark makes you an absolutely untouchable ghost. Lorenzo smiles darkly, whispering his queen has mastered the art of corporate execution. Peter continues to weep desperately, invoking his children to buy a drop of mercy. Penelope glides across the room, standing beside the crime boss. Looking down at the broken man, she says his family is the only reason his heart is still beating. Instead of using a bullet, she transferred $10 million of laundered offshore money directly into his personal bank account. Peter looks up, absolute terror drowning his eyes, as she mentions and framing him for embezzling from the mob. We must understand this brutal reality of the world. The ultimate destruction of an enemy is never taking their physical life, but systematically destroying their name until they have absolutely nowhere left to hide. Penelope clinically dissects his miserable future. By Monday, every asset he possesses will be locked down. He will face a federal cage for tax evasion, and the angry agent will throw him to the wolves as revenge for the public humiliation. The lawyer collapses, reduced to a hollow shell. In this agonizing silence, he finally grasps the truth. The true apex predator of the city is not the man holding the firearm, but the quiet woman typing on a screen. Lorenzo waves a hand, ordering out the guards to drag the broken man away, joking about keeping the spy pen. As the heavy doors seal shut, a deep nostalgia takes over the room. Carry this profound wisdom with you. The loudest person screaming in the room is rarely the one holding the actual power to destroy your entire life. The air in the penthouse changes, settling into the stillness of a bloodless victory. Lorenzo walks to the towering glass windows, staring down at the neon grid of the city. Every dark alley and hidden dollar down there now belongs to them. Penelope drifts over, innocently pressing on her temple against Dinnigin's shoulders. She rests a hand over his heart, anchoring herself to the rhythm of his pulse. Lorenzo murmurs into her hair, admitting the wealthy elites at their private clubs still whisper cruel insults about her. We all know how tragically funny human nature can be. People are desperately eager to judge a quiet book by its cover. They will mock a silent shadow, completely unaware that the very person they the very person laugh at holds the sharps right above their delicate puppet strings. You and I know exactly what it feels like to be underestimated. Lorenzo notes that socialites still view her as a timid girl who stumbled into power. Penelope looks up at him, her eyes burning with brilliant fire. She tells him to let them keep whispering. Let them assume she is fragile, and let them dig their own graves by ignoring her intellect. Lorenzo leans down, capturing her lips in a deep kiss that formally seals their dark reign over the city. He whispers that from this night forward, her name will only be spoken as a fearful prayer. The transformation is complete. The invisible wildflower is buried forever, replaced by a ruthless queen. We must take this lesson to heart. Never make the deeply tragic mistake of confusing a person's quiet patience for a lack of strength. High society completely missed the mark because people rarely look past the polished surface. They overlooked the ruthless apex predator hiding behind a polite stutter. Lorenzo was the only one who saw her true potential. He offered her the keys to a vast criminal empire, and she conquered it using nothing but the sheer weight of her intellect. The bloody era of violent street wars is officially dead. Together, they rule this city through calculated digital dominance. The painful era of the bullied outcast has been wiped clean, clearing the throne for a new queen. We have watched a beautiful story unfold before our eyes. Keep this profound thought close to your heart tonight. Never look down on someone just because they're quiet, for they might end up holding the deed to your very life. True authority does not come from a loud voice, but from brilliant patience. It is about holding the hidden cards and waiting for the perfect second to strike. Tell me, did her transformation leave you sitting there as speechless as I am? If you felt the satisfaction of watching this forgotten wallflower become an untouchable boss, hit that like button right now. If you know someone who craves a story where the woman commands the empire, send this broadcast their way. Take this profound truth with you tonight. Quiet, steady strategy will always outlive blind, impulsive rage. Subscribe and ring that bell for more tales of beautiful vengeance. Drop a comment below with your favorite ruthless move from our new queen. I will be waiting for you in the next one. Stay safe out there in the dark.